You need to exit the aircraft now. Security. The flight attendant's voice was ice. But she wasn't speaking to a passenger. She was blocking the path of the captain, who also happened to own the entire airline. The words, sharp and cold as shattered glass, sliced through the hushed, climate-controlled air of the Apex Airlines first-class cabin. Captain Eris Thorne froze mid-stride, the 4 gold stripes on her epaulets gleaming under the soft, recessed lighting. She'd been making her way to the cockpit, her professional pilot's watch, a discreet but elegant IWC, ticking away the final minutes before their scheduled departure. Her path was suddenly, inexplicably blocked by a beverage cart, wielded like a barricade by a flight attendant with a perfectly coiffed blonde bun and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me," Eris said, her voice calm and steady, a practice tone honed over thousands of flight hours and a handful of genuine emergencies. It was a voice that radiated quiet authority, yet the flight attendant seemed immune to it. Chloe Sterling, according to the pristine name tag pinned to her uniform, pointed a manicured finger toward the jet bridge. Her voice, unlike Eris's, was deliberately loud, pitched to carry across the cabin, ensuring every passenger in their leather-upholstered pods was a witness. "This is a restricted area for authorized personnel only. You can't just wander on here in a costume." A ripple of activity went through the cabin. Phones, previously tucked away, began to emerge. In seat 2A, a young man with a shock of green hair, Leo Vance, widened his eyes in disbelief and immediately angled his phone, the red dot of a recording app blinking to life. Other passengers, sensing the brewing drama, lowered their noise-canceling headphones and craned their necks. Eris glanced down at her own immaculate uniform, the crisp white shirt, the tailored black blazer, the captain's badge bearing the Apex logo, and then back at Chloe. The absurdity of the situation was staggering. Had she ever been so profoundly misjudged, so instantly dismissed in a space she commanded, in a company she had built from the ground up? The air grew thick with a palpable tension. Chloe's knuckles were white where she gripped the cart, a physical manifestation of her refusal to yield. She was creating a barrier, not just between a captain and her cockpit, but between perception and reality. "Listen, miss." Chloe's tone was a masterclass in condescension, dripping with a saccharine poison. "I don't know where you rented that outfit, but this isn't a fantasy convention. Real Apex pilots don't look like you." The comment hung in the air, ugly and explicit. Leo, in 2A, adjusted his phone, his TikTok live notification now showing 15 viewers and climbing. "Y'all seeing this?" he whispered into his phone's microphone. "Flight attendant is straight up blocking a black pilot from getting to the cockpit. This is wild." Eris reached into the inner pocket of her blazer, her movements measured and deliberate. She retrieved her credentials, her official FAA license, and her Apex Airlines Captain ID, complete with a holographic security seal. "I am Captain Eris Thorne. This is Apex Flight 722 to San Francisco. I am the pilot in command scheduled to fly this aircraft." Chloe barely gave the identification a cursory glance. "A very convincing fake," she said with a dismissive wave. "Did you get that made online too?" She then turned to the captive audience of passengers. "Don't worry, everyone. We'll have this situation sorted out momentarily. Your safety is our top priority." A man in seat 1C, a distinguished-looking gentleman with silver hair, lowered his copy of the Wall Street Journal. "Excuse me," he interjected, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. "She is clearly wearing a captain's uniform and has presented her identification. Perhaps you should be the one too." "Sir, please allow us to handle this." Chloe cut him off, her smile tightening. "Some people will do anything for a bit of attention these days." The overhead speaker crackled to life. "Good morning, passengers of Flight 722. This is your first officer, Eva Rostova. We're just experiencing a minor delay at the gate. We'll have you on your way to San Francisco very shortly." The voice was crisp with a faint, pleasant Eastern European accent. Eris's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Dr. Eris Thorne, Ph.D. in aerospace engineering from MIT, Harvard MBA, commercial pilot's license since she was 24. 20 years of flying experience. And yet, here she stood, being publicly humiliated and treated like an imposter in her own domain. "Chloe," Eris said, reading the name tag again, her voice dropping to a lower, more serious register. "I need you to move the cart and step aside so I can access the flight deck. And I need you to exit this plane before I'm forced to call airport security," Chloe retorted, crossing her arms. "You are disrupting our departure schedule and causing a disturbance." The accusation was so profoundly ironic, it was almost breathtaking. Leo's viewer count hit 52. The comments were starting to flood his screen. "OMG, is this for real? That flight attendant is on a power trip. Someone get a supervisor." A woman in seat 2B, dressed in an elegant business suit, leaned into the aisle. "Young lady," she said, her voice sharp with indignation. "That captain has shown nothing but professionalism. Perhaps you should check your own attitude before you call security on her." Chloe spun around, her face flushing slightly. "Ma'am, I'm simply doing my job. We can't have unauthorized individuals in pilot costumes wandering onto a secure aircraft. It's a major security risk." "Unauthorized?" the woman scoffed. "She looks more qualified than you do right now." Eris watched the scene unfold, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. This was no longer just about her. It was a live performance of a story that played out every day in countless ways across the country. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her CFO, James. "Board meeting confirmed for 3 p.m. New anti-bias policy draft is ready for your final review." The irony struck her with the force of a physical blow. In a few hours, she was scheduled to present a comprehensive new set of anti-discrimination protocols to her own board of directors. Right now, she was living the very reason those policies were so desperately necessary. Chloe noticed Eris glance at her phone, and her lips curled into a sneer. "What's wrong? Texting your friends to plan your story? Plotting how you'll post on social media about how unfairly you were treated?" Her voice dripped with a venomous sarcasm. "Maybe next time, you should dress for the job you actually have." A heavy silence fell over the cabin. The quiet hum of the auxiliary power unit seemed to amplify the weight of the moment. "And what job would that be?" Eris asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Chloe's smile was razor thin, a cruel slash in her perfectly made-up face. "Well, with your presentation, probably something in passenger services. Or maybe housekeeping." The cabin erupted in a collective, sharp intake of breath. The man in 1C folded his newspaper completely, his face a mask of undisguised disgust. The woman in 2B gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Leo's TikTok live stream exploded. The viewer count jumped from 52 to 148 in seconds. The comments flew by in an unreadable blur. Did she just say housekeeping? This is racist AF. Screen record this now. What airline is this? An elderly gentleman in seat 1D, who had been watching silently until now, slowly pushed himself to his feet. His movements were frail, but his voice was firm. "Young woman," he said, addressing Chloe directly, "I've been flying on commercial airliners for 60 years. That captain possesses more professionalism and grace in her little finger than you have displayed in this entire disgraceful encounter." Chloe's cheeks burned a bright crimson. "Sir, I'm following protocol. We can't just let anyone." "Anyone what?" the old man pressed, his voice rising. "Anyone who doesn't fit your narrow-minded stereotype of what a pilot should look like." The question hung in the air, thick and accusatory. Eris reached into her captain's briefcase, her fingers brushing against the cool, heavy metal of an object few people in the world, let alone the aviation industry, had ever seen. The Apex Obsidian Founder's Card. Only 12 had ever been minted. She had received hers after the private equity deal that gave her controlling ownership of the airline 2 years ago. For now, she left the card where it was. This wasn't the time. Not yet. The speaker crackled again. "This is your first officer speaking. We're still experiencing a slight delay here at the gate. We appreciate your continued patience." Eva's voice, still calm, now carried a subtle note of confusion. She was in the cockpit, waiting for her captain, likely wondering what could possibly be causing the holdup. They had flown together for the better part of a year. Eva, a formidable pilot who had flown MiGs in the Polish Air Force before immigrating, respected Eris implicitly. She knew her skill, trusted her judgment. "That's the real pilot," Chloe announced with a triumphant air, gesturing vaguely toward the front of the plane. "You see? Professional, experienced, exactly what you'd expect." The implication was clear. Leo's viewer count surged past 250. Someone with a decent following must have shared his live stream. The hashtag Apex Airlines fail was beginning to trend in the local area. Eris's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert from an aviation trade publication. Delta Airlines settles class action discrimination lawsuit for $12.5 million. The universe, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. She looked at Chloe, her face a mixture of defiance and ignorance. She looked at the passengers, their faces reflecting a spectrum of emotions from outrage to discomfort. And she looked at the small, glowing screen of Leo's phone, broadcasting this raw, unfiltered moment of prejudice to a growing digital audience. These stories, these real-life moments of bias, they only mattered if people saw them. "Chloe," Eris said, her voice now carrying a new weight, a resonance that made several passengers look up sharply. "You might want to seriously reconsider your next course of action." But Chloe was beyond reason. She was too committed to her flawed judgment, too invested in being right. She was already reaching for the interplane radio. "Ground control, this is Flight 722. I'm requesting immediate security assistance for a passenger removal." The die was cast. The situation was about to escalate beyond the confines of a first-class cabin and into the unforgiving glare of the public eye. Within 90 seconds, the controlled environment of the aircraft was breached. Ron O'Connell, the gate supervisor, appeared at the open door, his face etched with the weary impatience of a man 15 years into a job he no longer loved. His radio crackled with static-laced chatter. Flanking him were two airport security officers, their postures radiating a practiced, bored authority, their hands resting casually near their utility belts. "What's the situation here?" Ron's voice was loud, designed to take immediate command. Chloe straightened her posture, visibly relieved to have official backup. "We have an unauthorized individual impersonating an airline crew member," she announced, her voice filled with self-righteous conviction. "She's refusing to exit the aircraft and is causing a significant disruption to our departure." Ron's eyes swept over Eris, taking in a uniform, the poised demeanor, the captain's briefcase at her feet. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He was looking at a picture of competence. But then he looked at Chloe, his subordinate, the employee whose report he was duty-bound to trust. He made his choice, opting for the path of least resistance. "Ma'am," he said, his gaze hardening as he addressed Eris, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." Leo's live stream hit 412 viewers. The comment section was a chaotic waterfall of text. "Record everything. This is insane. Get his name tag. Share this now. Hashtag Apex Airlines." The businessman in 1C shot to his feet. "This is absolutely preposterous. That woman is clearly a pilot. Look at her uniform, her credentials. Are you all blind?" "Sir, please remain seated," one of the officers, Rodriguez, stated in a flat monotone. "We are handling the situation." But the businessman was no longer a lone voice. The elderly gentleman from 1D was standing beside him, and the woman from 2B had joined them in the aisle. A small pocket of resistance was forming, a fragile wall of decency against the tide of bureaucratic absurdity. "I've been flying for 60 years, the elderly man repeated, his voice trembling slightly with anger. "This is discrimination, pure and simple. I know it when I see it." The second officer, whose name tag read Williams, an irony not lost on Eris, stepped forward. "Everyone needs to calm down and let us do our job." They had a procedure to follow, and Eris, regardless of the truth, was now officially categorized as a disruption. Ron pulled out his phone, presumably to call the station manager. the next link in the chain of command. While he was dialing, Eris noticed something that made her pulse quicken. The digital audience was multiplying. It wasn't just Leo's TikTok anymore. A woman in 3A was streaming on Instagram. A man in 2C had his camera app open, recording silently. Even one of the other flight attendants, who had come up from the economy cabin to see what the commotion was about, had discreetly positioned herself by the galley, her phone angled to capture the scene. Multiple angles, multiple platforms. This moment was being captured, archived, and broadcast in real time to hundreds, perhaps thousands, of viewers. The very social media monitoring systems she had championed and funded as CEO were now documenting her own public humiliation. "Karen is on her way down," Ron announced, snapping his phone shut. He was referring to Karen Miller, the station manager. "She'll get this sorted out." Eris's phone buzzed again. Another text from James, her CFO. "New PR crisis protocols are ready for your review. Are you available for a quick call?" She almost laughed out loud. Crisis protocols. She was living inside a case study for one right now. Before anyone could react further, Karen Miller burst through the aircraft door like a low-pressure system. She was a short, sharp-featured woman with a brisk, no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had climbed the corporate ladder by never, ever backing down. "What in God's name is going on here?" Her voice cut through the cabin chatter like a serrated knife. "We have a departure window to hit." Ron quickly briefed her, his account painting Eris as a delusional wannabe, a disruptive passenger in a costume. Karen's eyes narrowed as she subjected Eris to a head-to-toe inspection, her gaze lingering with open skepticism. "Even if you were some kind of pilot," Karen said, her tone dripping with disdain, "you're clearly not our pilot." She paused for dramatic effect, letting her next words land with maximum impact. "Apex has a certain image to uphold, and frankly, you don't fit it." The words struck the cabin like a physical blow. Several passengers gasped audibly. The woman streaming on Instagram zoomed in on Karen's face, capturing the raw, unfiltered bigotry for posterity. Leo's viewer count exploded. 950, 200, 1,500. Someone with a massive following had just shared a stream. The hashtag Apex as an image was born and was already rocketing up the trending charts. "An image," repeated the businessman from 1C, his voice thick with disgust. "Are you hearing yourselves right now? Is this the official policy of Apex Airlines?" Karen whipped her head around, her eyes flashing. "Sir, if you do not return to your seat immediately, you will be removed from this flight as well." The threat backfired spectacularly. More passengers stood up, their faces a mixture of anger and solidarity. The cabin was now clearly divided. "This is going viral," someone whispered from the back of the first-class section. "Good," another passenger replied firmly. "The world needs to see this." Officer Rodriguez spoke into his shoulder radio, his voice now laced with a new urgency. "Control, we may require backup at gate B14. The situation is escalating." Just then, the cockpit door swung open. First Officer Eva Rostova emerged, her expression a mask of confusion. "What is all this commotion? Where is Captain Thorne? We need to begin our pre-flight checklist." The cabin fell into a sudden, complete silence. Even the frantic tapping on phone screens seemed to pause. Ron O'Connell stepped forward, his confidence misplaced. "Captain, we're just removing a disruptive passenger who was impersonating the crew. We'll be out of your way in a moment." Eva's eyes scanned the scene until they locked onto Eris. Her expression shifted in a rapid, visible sequence, from confusion to utter disbelief, and then to a simmering, barely contained fury. "That is Captain Thorne," she said, her voice, though accented, carrying the unmistakable ring of absolute authority. "She's the pilot in command of this aircraft. We have been scheduled to fly together for the past 8 months." Chloe's face went a ghostly white. Karen Miller's mouth opened, then snapped shut, no sound emerging. Ron took an involuntary step backward, the color draining from his face as the foundation of his reality crumbled beneath him. But Karen recovered with the speed of a seasoned corporate fighter, her training in damage control and blame-shifting kicking into high gear. "Well, she snapped, turning the accusation back on Eris. If she's really a pilot, why didn't she just present the proper identification from the very beginning? Why cause all this unnecessary drama? The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterful, if despicable, pivot. Turn the victim into the aggressor. Make her responsible for the very discrimination she was experiencing. Leo's stream was now approaching 2,000 viewers. Comments flooded in from across the globe. Atlanta airport discrimination. Apex Airlines needs to answer for this. Screenshot those employee names. Karen Miller is a racist. The digital firestorm was growing into an inferno. Eris reached into her blazer pocket again, her fingers closing around the cool, dense weight of the Apex Obsidian Founders card. The card that would end this farce in a single, stunning moment. The card that would detonate a shockwave through the lives of everyone present. But she paused. She looked at the faces of the passengers who had stood up for her. She thought of the countless others who faced similar, or worse, indignities every single day. People without a founder's card. People without the ultimate corporate power. People who couldn't flip the script with a single, dramatic revelation. This moment, she realized, had to be about more than just her own vindication. It had to be about them. Officer Rodriguez, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension. Before you and your partner escort me off this plane, I would like to make one phone call. Ma'am, you can call whoever you want from the terminal building, he replied, already moving to guide her toward the door. No, Eris interrupted, her voice now edged with a steel that made everyone, including the officers, stop in their tracks. I think I'll make it right here. She pulled out her phone, ignoring the dozens of notifications lighting up her screen. She navigated to her contacts and dialed a number she knew by heart. A number that connected directly to the man who executed her commands without question. The phone rang once. James, it's Eris. Every person in the first-class cabin strained to hear, the silence absolute. I need you to ground all Apex operations. System-wide. Effective immediately. The phone call lasted exactly 47 seconds. Eris spoke in calm, measured tones, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around her. Authorization code Obsidian, 77, Alpha. Yes, all flights. Institute a system-wide operational hold. Execute the board meeting emergency protocol. Now, she ended the call and slipped the phone back in her pocket as if she had just ordered pizza. For a full 30 seconds, nothing happened. An eternity of silence. Karen Miller allowed a small, triumphant smirk to cross her lips. Ron O'Connell shook his head with a look of pity. Chloe crossed her arms, her confidence flooding back, certain the call had been a desperate, pathetic bluff. Then, the world began to change. The large departure board visible through the windows at gate B14 flickered. The status of flight 722 switched from departing to delayed. Then, a moment later, to canceled. A collective gasp went through the passengers who could see it. Within the next 90 seconds, every single Apex Airlines flight on that board, to Dallas, to London, to Tokyo, flashed the same ominous, blood-red status. Operation suspended. The gate agent's computer terminal chimed with a high-priority emergency alert. Her face went ashen as she read the message, scrolling across her screen. She frantically picked up her desk phone, dialed, and was met with a busy signal. She tried another extension, then another. Nothing. What the hell? Ron muttered, fumbling for his radio with shaking hands. Control, what's the status on Apex operations? We're seeing cancellations across the board. The radio crackled back instantly, the dispatcher's voice tight with panic. All Apex flights are grounded by executive order. We're trying to reach corporate management now. Nobody is answering their phones. Karen Miller's smirk vanished as if it had been wiped from her face. That's impossible, she whispered, her voice trembling. Nobody has that kind of authority except... She stopped mid-sentence, her face draining of all color as the horrifying, impossible realization began to dawn on her like a black sun rising. Leo's live stream exploded. His viewer count rocketed past 3,500 and was climbing at a dizzying rate. The comments were flying faster than anyone could possibly read. Did she just ground the entire airline? Who is this woman? Holy S asterisk asterisk T, this is insane. Other passengers were now frantically checking their phones, seeing the breaking news alerts from CNN and Reuters about Apex Airlines' sudden, unprecedented global operational suspension. The businessman in 1C was refreshing his flight app over and over, watching in disbelief as his entire multi-leg international itinerary evaporated in real time. Eris reached in her blazer one last time and withdrew the Apex Obsidian Founders card. It wasn't plastic. It was a sleek, matte black card forged from a titanium alloy, heavier than it looked, with the Apex logo embedded in a subtly shimmering, micro-etched pattern. Only 12 existed in the world. She held it up for everyone to see, rotating it slowly so the unique holographic emblem caught the cabin lights, refracting a rainbow of colors. "My name," she said, her voice carrying across the silent cabin with devastating, quiet power, "is Dr. Eris Thorne. I'm not just a pilot for Apex Airlines." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle into the stunned silence. "I own Apex Airlines." The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum so profound that the low hum of the aircraft systems seemed to vanish. Chloe's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no sound coming out. Ron's radio slipped from his nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. Karen Miller grabbed the back of the nearest seat to steady herself, her knuckles turning white against the deep blue fabric. Officer Rodriguez was the first to find his voice, his professional composure cracking. "Ma'am, are you saying you are the majority stockholder and chief executive officer of Apex Airlines?" "Yes," Eris replied, her tone conversational, almost gentle. "I acquired controlling interest 2 years ago through a private equity firm I founded. I've been flying routes personally to understand our operations from the ground up." She then took out her tablet, tapped the screen, and held it up. It displayed her corporate email signature. Dr. Eris Thorne, Chief Executive Officer, Apex Airlines Incorporated. First Officer Eva Rostova stepped forward from the cockpit door, her uniform crisp, her expression grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, I can confirm that Captain Thorne is indeed the owner of this airline. We have flown together many times. She is one of the most skilled and dedicated aviators I have ever had the privilege of working with." The businessman in 1C suddenly started to laugh. It wasn't a laugh of humor, but of pure, unadulterated disbelief that bordered on hysteria. You try to kick the owner." "Off her own plane," he choked out between gasps. "The actual owner." A woman in 3B whispered loudly, "Oh my God, this is better than any movie I've ever seen." Leo's phone was visibly shaking in his hands. His livestream viewer count was a blur, skyrocketing past 5,000. Someone with millions of followers had clearly shared it. The hashtag Shones the Airline was now trending nationwide, eclipsing all others. But Eris Thorne was not finished. Not even close. "Chloe," Eris said, her voice cutting through the stunned chaos like a surgeon's scalpel. "You mentioned that Apex has standards. You are absolutely correct. We do." She swiped the screen of her tablet, bringing up a presentation she had been preparing for that afternoon's board meeting. It was filled with charts, graphs, and legal documents, all professionally formatted and bearing the Apex corporate logo. According to Federal Aviation Regulation 121.391, she began, her voice crisp and clear, airlines are held directly liable for discriminatory actions committed by their employees. Current case law in this district suggests damages ranging from $50 to $200 million for incidents that indicate systemic bias issues. Karen Miller tried to interject, her voice cracking. "Ms. Thorne, Dr. Thorne, I'm certain we can resolve this internally." "I'm not finished," Eris stated, her voice carrying the unshakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms filled with Fortune 500 executives. Apex Airlines transports approximately 2.3 million passengers monthly. We generate, on average, $847 million in quarterly revenue. She swiped to the next slide, revealing real-time financial data pulled directly from the company's internal servers. Numbers that made several passengers gasp. This was not public information. This was the airline's most closely guarded financial intelligence. Our customer satisfaction index has dropped 12% this year alone, she continued, her eyes fixed on Karen. Discrimination complaints are up 34%. Based on our proprietary social media monitoring algorithms, which are tracking this incident as we speak, today's event will cost this company an estimated $2.8 million in lost bookings within the next 48 hours. And that's the optimistic projection. Ron O'Connell's radio, which he had shakily retrieved from the floor, squawked again. The dispatcher's voice was now formal and deferential. All units, we have direct confirmation from corporate headquarters. Apex operations have been grounded by CEO Dr. Aris Thorne. Repeat, CEO Thorne has executive authority for all company decisions. The weight of those words settled over everyone like a physical blanket. Even Officer Rodriguez straightened his posture, his expression shifting from that of a law enforcement officer to that of a man recognizing he was in the presence of immense, legitimate power. Aris looked directly at Chloe, her gaze steady and unforgiving. You asked if I was taking selfies to post about my unfair treatment. As it happens, Apex has one of the most robust social media monitoring systems in the industry. We track every mention, every complaint, every video posted about our company. She gestured with her tablet toward Leo, who was still live streaming, his hands trembling so badly the video was likely shaking. This incident is currently being viewed by over 5,000 people in real time. It has been shared on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. The video footage from multiple angles will be seen by hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, of people within the next 24 hours. Chloe's face was utterly devoid of color, her earlier confidence having evaporated like mist in a desert. I didn't know, she stammered. I'm so sorry. You didn't know my position, Aris corrected her calmly. But you knew I was a human being. You knew I was wearing a captain's uniform and carrying proper credentials. You saw my identification. You heard my first officer confirm my identity. That should have been more than enough. She then turned her piercing gaze on Karen Miller. You said that even if I was some kind of pilot, I wasn't your pilot because Apex has an image to uphold. What image, precisely, were you referring to, Karen? Karen stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence, her mouth moving soundlessly like a beached fish. Let me help you, Aris continued, her voice taking on the tone of a professor addressing a particularly slow student. The official Apex Airlines mission statement, which I personally wrote, includes the phrase to serve with dignity and respect for every passenger and employee. Our employee handbook, which you are required to read and sign annually, specifically prohibits any form of discrimination based on race, gender, or physical appearance. Both of those documents carry my signature. The tablet screen now showed the actual Apex policies, the dense legal language, the anti-discrimination clauses, the penalty structures that could end careers and trigger multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Officer Rodriguez stepped forward carefully, his training kicking in as he recognized the need to de-escalate, even if he was hopelessly out of his depth. Dr. Thorne, on behalf of airport security, I apologize for the confusion. We were simply responding to a call from airline staff about a disruptive passenger. You were doing your job based on false and biased information, Aris acknowledged with a slight nod. The fault does not lie with airport security. You followed your protocol. Her eyes then moved deliberately like spotlights from Ron to Karen and finally settled on Chloe like a laser, finding its target. The fault lies with employees who made assumptions about my capabilities based on my appearance, who chose to escalate a situation rather than verify information, who prioritized their personal biases over basic human decency and explicit company policy. Leo's viewer count hit 6,500. The comments were a tidal wave of outrage, support, and disbelief, flowing faster than water through a broken dam. Screenshots of Chloe, Karen, and Ron were already circulating on social media, being shared thousands of times per minute. their faces becoming the new, unwilling symbols of corporate racism. "There's something else you all should know about today," Eris announced, checking her IWC watch. "In exactly 97 minutes, I was scheduled to present a new, company-wide anti-discrimination and bias awareness policy to the Apex Board of Directors." She swiped the tablet to another slide, revealing draft policy documents, implementation timelines, and multi-million-dollar budget allocations. The presentation includes provisions for mandatory, immersive bias training for all 30,000 employees, new anonymous reporting systems for discrimination incidents, and a zero-tolerance policy resulting in immediate termination for repeat offenders. The irony was devastating, hanging in the air like thick smoke. Chloe and her colleagues had just provided the perfect, horrifying case study for the very policies designed to prevent their behavior. "I was going to recommend a gradual, 6-month rollout," Eris continued, her voice gaining momentum. "But today's events strongly suggest we need to move on a much more aggressive timeline." As if summoned by her words, 3 people in impeccably tailored suits appeared at the aircraft door. The man in the lead, tall and distinguished, carrying a leather briefcase, was clearly James, her CFO. Behind him were a sharp-eyed woman with a legal pad and a nervous-looking man clutching an iPad. "Eris," James said, his voice carrying the easy familiarity of a long-trusted colleague. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, James. But we have a Class A corporate crisis that requires an immediate and decisive response." James's gaze swept the cabin, taking in the security officers, the sobbing flight attendant, the live-streaming teenager, and the terrified-looking station manager. His expression hardened into a mask of cold fury. "I see." He turned to the woman behind him. "Sarah, please begin documenting everything." Statements from everyone. Sarah, Apex's chief legal counsel, nodded grimly. She had handled discrimination cases before, but never one where the victim was the CEO. "Before we proceed," Eris announced to the cabin, "I want everyone to understand the legal and financial framework we are now operating under." She gestured for James to open his briefcase. James didn't need to. He simply turned his tablet toward the group. Current quarterly revenue, $847 million. Daily operational costs, $9.2 million. The cost of grounding our global fleet for 1 hour is approximately $384,000. We have now been grounded for 27 minutes. The numbers hit the cabin like physical blows. Chloe's crying intensified. "Ms. Miller," Eris addressed Karen directly. "You currently earn an annual salary of $87,000 as a station manager. Your pension vests in 14 months. Your monthly mortgage payment is $2,240. Karen's mouth fell open. "How do you?" "I have access to all employee data," Eris explained calmly. "I also know you have 2 children in college and that your husband was recently laid off. These are not threats. They're facts. They're the real-world stakes of the decisions you make." Sarah, the lawyer, pulled out a folder. "Ms. Miller, your actions today violated Apex policies 4.1, 4.7, and 6.3. Mr. O'Connell, you violated 4.1 and 7.2. Ms. Sterling, you violated all of the above, plus policy 2.5 regarding passenger interaction. The standard penalty for multiple flagrant policy violations is immediate termination for cause." "Please," Karen whispered, her voice breaking. "I have a family. So do the millions of people who will see this video and judge our airline based on your behavior." Eris replied, her voice devoid of sympathy. She then laid out their options, not as a negotiation, but as a verdict. "You have a choice. Option 1 is immediate termination, and we will pursue all legal avenues to recoup damages from you personally. Option 2, she paused, is that you accept a path of remediation." She looked at Karen. "You will be demoted to gate agent with a 40% pay reduction. You will complete 200 hours of mandatory sensitivity and de-escalation training, and you will write a detailed 50-page analysis of your decision-making process today to be used in our new training modules." She turned to Ron. "You will be transferred to baggage services. Your supervisory role is eliminated. You will complete the same training." Finally, she looked at Chloe. You can accept immediate termination with a neutral reference, or you can accept a 6-month unpaid suspension, during which you will perform 300 hours of community service with civil rights organizations. Upon your return, it will be on a probationary basis, and you will co-facilitate bias awareness workshops. Through her tears, Chloe looked up. The suspension, she choked out. Please, I'll do anything to make this right. The video of this incident, Eris announced to all of them, will become mandatory viewing for every single Apex employee. Your faces, your words, and your actions will serve as a permanent lesson on the consequences of prejudice. 1 year later, Dr. Eris Thorne stood at the podium of the National Aviation Diversity Summit in Washington, D.C. The audience of over 1,000 industry professionals was silent, captivated. A year ago, one of our flights was delayed. She began, her voice resonating through the auditorium. That delay, caused by an act of profound ignorance, ended up changing not just our airline, but our entire industry. She clicked to the next slide. It was a picture of a smiling young man with green hair. Leo Vance, the young man who live-streamed that incident on TikTok, is now Apex's Director of Social Media Accountability. His job is to ensure that our digital footprint aligns with our corporate values in real time. Applause rippled through the crowd. In the front row, Leo grinned and nodded. The flight attendant, Chloe Sterling, Eris continued, completed her community service with the NAACP. She returned to Apex and is now one of our most effective diversity and inclusion training coordinators. Her authentic, painful story of personal failure and transformation connects with employees in a way no corporate consultant ever could. More applause, this time louder. 3 rows back, Chloe smiled, a genuine, humble smile. Karen Miller is now our head gate agent at Atlanta's busiest terminal, where she personally implements the very policies she once violated. Her performance reviews consistently show the highest passenger satisfaction metrics in the entire airport. The audience was quiet now, absorbed in these stories of accountability and redemption. Eris clicked to a slide filled with hard data. In the last 12 months, Apex has seen a 92% reduction in discrimination complaints. Our customer satisfaction scores have increased by 38%. Employee retention is at an industry-leading 94%. She paused. But more importantly, 16 other major airlines, including our largest competitors, have adopted versions of the Apex protocol. What started on one aircraft has influenced an industry serving over 1 billion passengers annually. The final slide was a simple, powerful question. What will you do with your power? We chose transparency, accountability, and systemic change, Eris concluded. Because real transformation happens when we turn our moments of greatest failure into our greatest opportunities for growth. The standing ovation was deafening. Later that night, in her hotel room, Eris reviewed the social media response to her speech. The hashtag aviation accountability was trending globally. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from James. Board just approved expanding the Diversity Scholarship Fund to $15 million. 3 more international carriers just signed on to the protocol. She smiled and typed back, "Good. This is just the beginning." Outside her window, planes took off and landed in a perfect rhythmic dance. Each one was a vessel of trust, carrying hundreds of souls who expected dignity, respect, and safe passage. Most would never know how their journey had been shaped by one ugly moment and the powerful, systemic changes that followed. These stories matter. Your voice can spark change, too. Have you witnessed discrimination in your workplace, your community, or while traveling? Share your story in the comments below. When we speak up about injustice, we make it impossible for bias to hide in the shadows. Every story shared is a step toward a more just and equitable world. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. Comment, respect, if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, courage, and transformation. Hit that notification bell, because these real-life stories of people standing up for what's right matter now more than ever. Share this story if it moved you. Together, We can make discrimination impossible to ignore.